We're going to start by crumpling up a piece of paper. You can see that I have my paper set up in front of me, ready to go. I'm going to start by deciding how big I want the paper to be on my drawing. So I'm going to make some little marks really light on the paper. Then I'm going to use my pencil, my arm held out, all the way outstretched, and my thumb kind of at the base of my measurement. I'm going to compare how tall the paper is to how wide it is. From what I can tell here, based on my measurement with my pencil, the paper ball is about half as tall, a little more than half as tall than it is wide. So I'm going to kind of make those marks with my pencil to start off my shape of the paper ball. So I know that it'll be about a little over half as tall as it is wide. I double check with my pencil using that as a measurement tool once again, and I make a little bit of an adjustment, a small adjustment to make my shape a little bit more accurate. Sometimes you have to do that when you're starting off your drawing, and that's totally fine. So again, I just made some really light marks so I can determine how wide and how tall the paper ball should be based on what I'm looking at. So that was the purpose of kind of checking that with my pencil, checking the proportions of how tall the paper ball is compared to how wide it is. And now you can see that I'm just slowly starting to work on creating the outline of the shape by looking really closely at the edges of that paper ball and trying to copy them as close as I can on my drawing. It helps to try to trick your brain into thinking, or into not thinking, I should say, about what it is you're drawing. So for this drawing, we're drawing a crumpled ball of paper, but it's more helpful to trick your brain into thinking that you're just copying a shape in this stage of the drawing. You're just trying to copy the shape that you see that's created by that paper ball, and try not to make it look like anything. With a drawing like this, it's a little bit easier to trick your brain because the crumpled paper ball, it makes sort of an abstract form. It also helps to kind of think of yourself as a little tiny ant who's crawling very slowly over the edge of the entire object that you're drawing. And you got to go really, really slow as the tiny ant so you can really trace over every single edge of the shape. And you can do that same thing with your pencil. Just have to go really slow and look really closely. The next step is, once we've gotten the shape to be as close as possible to what we're seeing, is to start adding some of the interior shapes within the form. So with this crumpled ball of paper, we're going to try to pick out some of these major folds and just sort of refine the shapes with our pencil. Sketch them in really light because most of the shapes and forms are going to be created with adding value later on when we're drawing. So when you start shading, the easiest way to approach it, especially with something complicated like this type of form, with a lot of different edges and surfaces, is finding the very darkest parts and shading those in. But don't shade them in really dark at first, keep them kind of light, and then you can build off of that later. But just find the really darkest shadows and block those in at about 50% of their full value. At this point, we've moved past just the main shadows and we're working on finding some of the medium tones of value. And it's really important this entire time you're shading, keep a really light touch with your pencil. So try to hold your pencil closer to the back of the pencil, try to loosen your grip, and try to apply just really light pressure. And then as you define your values a bit more, you're gonna just layer So go over the same spots to make them darker, but still use that light pressure. So as I'm shading, especially with a complicated object like this, I'm just trying to find those shapes of value. I'm looking to see where the dark gray shapes are, where the light gray and medium gray, and I'm trying to create those shapes through layering my marks. The shapes of value are what really make this object start to look three-dimensional. So creating the changes from a dark gray to medium gray and using detail, so really closely looking at those smaller shapes and trying to copy the smaller shapes of value as close as I can, really helps to give this drawing a sense of texture and a sense of form. And if you're not looking closely at those changes, you're not going to achieve that three-dimensional effect. To finish up this drawing, I just want to make sure that I've shaded enough value and layered my marks enough to achieve a full range from dark to light. As you can see from the reference, there should only be a few areas near the top where the light is hitting the paper ball that are left pure white. The rest of the drawing should have at least some light grays and medium grays to create a sense of form. And to finish off the drawing, I simply took a ruler or a straight edge and I drew a box around my smaller drawing since I didn't fill up the whole paper, and I created a composition, and I decided to shade in some of the background or negative space to make my drawing pop out more.